My name is Joshua Mugabi. I welcome you to topic 10.2, sexual reproduction in plants. We are on learning outcome B. Know the processes of pollination, fertilization, and fruit formation. We are going to emphasize on the learning activity. In groups or pairs, learners examine examples of flowers that are wind pollinated, like maize, grasses, and some that are insect pollinated, and compare the two, especially the stamens or the anthers and the stigmas of each, relating structure to function. Learners then compare images or microscope slides of pollen grains from wind and insect pollinated flowers, again relating structure to function. Individuals produce a table or a report comparing the two types of flowers and pollen. Let's start. Wind versus insect pollinated flowers. Item 1. We are starting with wind pollinated flowers. A teacher provides learner with a real specimen of wind-pollinated flowers, maize, tassel, and grass, and insect-pollinated flowers like hibiscus. What we have here, this is wind-pollinated flower for the grass. And what we have here is insect-pollinated flower, the hibiscus. Task. Observe the given flower specimens and identify stamens, anthers, and stigmas. Wind-pollinated flower. Let's look at a wind-pollinated flower. You want to examine it, a wind-pollinated flower like a grass. This is our grass flower. Can be panicum maximum, those flowers. When you look at them, they have those structures. We want to look at the stamen. Stamen is the male part, which has got the filaments and the anthers. So these ones that we are seeing here, all these ones, those are anther heads, which form what we call the stamen. Then we want also to look at the stigma. Now we have here the whole of this one in red. That is what we call the stigma. The stigma forms what we call the couple. Stigma and the style, they form the couple. Whereas the anther and the filament, they are the ones that form the stamen. That one is the wind-pollinated flower. We have looked at the stamen, the anthers, and the stigma. Now let us look at insect-pollinated flowers. Remember, we want to look at the stamens, anthers, and the stigma. So here, when you look at it, if we start with the stamen, stamen is made up of the male parts. Now, here we have the filaments and the anther heads, those ones. All these ones here are the anther heads. Now, the anther heads and the filaments, anther heads and the filaments, they form what we call the stamen. So all these anther heads and their filaments, they form what we call the stamen. Then the stigma is this part here. It is part of the female part of the plant. That is the stigma. The stigma is attached to the style, and the style is attached to the ovary. Compare the structure of wind-pollinated and insect-pollinated flowers. We shall start with the stamen and anthers. When you look at the wind-pollinated flowers, these ones here, these are wind-pollinated flowers, the stamen hangs loosely outside the flower. So we say that the stamen includes the anther heads and also their filaments. Those are the stamen. But when you look at them, you will see that they are hanging loosely outside of the flower. They are outside, hanging outside of the flower. The anthers are exposed and dangle freely. They are just exposed outside. The flower is here, but the anther are just outside, dangling freely outside. That is the stamen and anthers of wind-pollinated flowers. Still on wind-pollinated flower, this allows easy release of large amount of light pollen into the air. Because the anther heads are outside, dangling outside of the flower, it allows the easy release of large amount of light pollen into the air. So pollen will be released in the air freely, much of it, and then it will flow in the air because it is light. Let's now go to insect-pollinated flowers. Now, the insect-pollinated flowers, the stamen are firmly positioned inside the flower. So for the insect-pollinated flowers, the stamen, which makes up the anthers and the filaments, they are firmly positioned inside the flower. Anthers, they produce sticky or spiky pollen that attaches to insects. This pollen here that you are seeing in yellow, it is sticky and it is spiky. It has like spikes. That sticky substance and the spike shape is the one that attaches to the insect so that the insect can move away with it. Adapted to contact with insect rather than wind. So when you look at this anther, they produce pollen, and that pollen, we say it is sticky and it is spiky. That adaptation of sticking and having spikes is for contact with the insect so that it can attach itself on the insect rather than wind. So it is not facilitated to be moved by wind, but the adaptations are for attachment onto the insect so that it can be transported. Now we want to look at the stigma. We have gone back to wind-pollinated flowers. The stigma are large, that is, on wind-pollinated flower. They are feathery and branched. So when you come to our wind-pollinated flower here, we want to locate the stigma. The stigma is this part that you are seeing here. That one and this one. Those are what we are calling the stigma. Those two structures here. Those are stigmas. When you look at them, they are very large. And you will see feathery structures on them. And you can see that they are branched. That is the structure of the stigma of wind-pollinated flowers. They are designed to trap airborne pollen grains. So they are structured the way they are structured. We are saying they are feathery. That feathery structure is to trap airborne pollen grain. We said that when pollen is released here from the anther, it will move with the air and it will find this stigma, which is feathery and large and branched. And that one will be able to attract, to trap that pollen because of being feathery. Now we are moving to insect-pollinated flowers. And what do we want to look at? We want to look at the stigma. So when we come to insect-pollinated flowers, this is our insect-pollinated flower and this is the stigma. So the stigma, all the stigmas are sticky. So when you look at them, these are stigmas of the hibiscus flower. You can see that the structure, how they look like, they appear to be sticky. And they are designed to hold the pollen brought by insect. So when you look at this structure here, it shows that when an insect comes and lands here, the pollen which is on the body of the insect is going to be trapped by these sticky substances which are on the stigma. So that is how the stigma of the insect-pollinated flowers appear. They are sticky, and that stickiness helps them to hold pollen that is brought by insects. Now we want to look at the genoflower structure. Genoflower structure. We have gone back to wind-pollinated flowers. Now the wind-pollinated flowers, they are small. They are dull-colored petals. So if you look at the wind-pollinated flowers, their size is very small in color. And when you look at their petals are very dull. They cannot attract insects. In addition to that, they have no scent, neither do they have nectar. So when you look at them, no scent on them, and they don't produce any nectar. And in addition to that, the flowers often hang loosely. The flowers are just hanging loosely. Why? Because they are wind pollinated. So they hang loosely so that the wind can easily shake the anther head and allow the pollen to flow, and it goes and it lands onto the stigma. So they don't need to have a color petal because they don't attract insect. They are pollinated by wind. Therefore, there is no need for scent, there is no need for nectar. And they are hanging loosely so that they are exposed to moving wind, so that wind can carry out the pollination. Now we go back to insect-pollinated flowers. We want to look at the genome structure. The insect-pollinated flowers, they are brightly colored petals. When you look at the insect-pollinated flowers, you see the petals are brightly colored. Why are they brightly colored? To attract the insects which are going to carry out pollination. In addition to that, often scented with nectar. They have got a very good scent which attracts insect. And in addition to that, they have nectar which they provide as a reward of pollinators. So that is the insect-pollinated flower. Brightly colored petals, they are scented, and they have nectar. Still insect-pollinated flowers, the flowers are suitable for insect landing. When you look at the flowers, they have petals which have got landing site. The insect can come here and land on the petal. So their structure is in such a way that it provides surface area for the pollinator, the insect which is coming, to have space where it can land. Examine pollen grains from both flower types using images or slide. Now let us try to look here. We have two types of pollen grains, and I want you to identify. Look at them and see. You have this type here, which is the same as this type. You can see how it looks like. And you have this type here. Can you see any difference between these two types of pollen. So let's go back to our task. Examine pollen grains from both flower types using images or slides. We shall start with wind-pollinated pollen. Now, when we talk about wind-pollinated pollen, they are light, they are smooth, they are tiny and numerous. So I want us to come back here. Which one do you think, according from the definition here, light, smooth, tiny, and numerous, which one do you think here are light, are smooth, and tiny? Which one do you think are smooth and light? The way we look at them, these ones don't look to be light. You can see they have got spikes. These ones, you can look at them, you can see they are smooth. So which means that these ones are going to be wind-pollinated pollens. These are wind-pollinated pollens, and these ones then will be insect-pollinated pollen. So the wind-pollinated pollens are smooth, light, tiny, and they are numerous, easily carried along distances by wind. Because they are light, tiny, and smooth, they can easily be carried long distances by wind. And in addition to that, they are not sticky. They are not sticky. You can see because they are smooth, they are not sticky. They can't stick on anything. Now let us look at insect-pollinated pollen. And we were saying that these ones here are the insect-pollinated pollen. Let us try to see whether the characteristics will confer with their structure. They are sticky, spiky, or rough surfaced. So when you look at them here, you may not see the stickness, but at least you can see the spikes. They are spiky and they are rough. They have a surface which is rough. So these ones tell us that these are insect-pollinated pollens. On that one, they easily attach on insects. Because they have spikes, they can easily attach themselves on the insect. And they are large and fewer in number. So they don't need to be produced very many. They are very few and they are large in size so that they can stick on the surface of the insect and they can be transported to other parts. Because of that one sticking, they're carried from one point, taken to another point directly to the stigma. They don't need to be produced in large number. Discuss as a group and agree on the key differences. So we have our table here. We have the futures, wind-pollinated flowers, and insect-pollinated flowers. We want to look at the differences. We shall start with the petals. When you talk of the petals, the wind-pollinated flowers, the petals are small, they are dull, and they are not scented. Whereas if you look at the insect-pollinated flowers, they are large, they are bright, and they are scented. That's a difference. Now, when we go to the stamen, you will see that for the wind-pollinated flowers, they are long. The stamen are long. They are hanging and they are exposed so that they can easily be carried by wind. Whereas if you look at the insect-pollinated flowers, you will see that they are firmly positioned inside the flower. Why? Because it is the insect pollinator which will carry the pollen from the stamen to the stigma. When you come to the anthers, you will find that for the wind-pollinated anthers, they are loose and they release pollen easily. We saw that the anthers of the insect-pollinated flower, they are hanging outside and they are easily attached, meaning they can release pollen very easily. Whereas if you look at the insect-pollinated anthers, you will see that they are steady, firmly attached. Insects brush against them. The insect brush against them so that they can pick the pollen from them and then transfer it to another flower. Now let us look at the pollen. When you look at the pollen, you will see that for the wind-pollinated flowers, the pollen grains are very small, they are light, they are smooth, and they are very many. Why? Small so that they can easily be carried by wind, and then light so that they can easily flow in wind, smooth so that they can attach themselves on the stigma, and they are very many so that when they are blown by wind, they can at least some of them land onto the stigma. Whereas if you look at the insect-pollinated flower, you are going to see that the pollen grains are very large. They are sticky and some are spiky, and they are produced in few numbers. Why? In few numbers, they are produced in few numbers because they are carried by pollinators from the stamen to the stigma, and they are sticky and spiky so that they can attach themselves to the stigma from the pollinator. Now when you come to the stigma, you will see that for the insect-pollinated stigma, they are large. Wind-pollinated stigma, the stigma is large, it is feathery to capture the pollen. Whereas if you look at the insect-pollinated stigma, you will see that it is sticky, and the purpose of being sticky is to hold insect-borne pollen. Now when we go to nectar, for those ones that are wind-pollinated, nectar is absent, but it is present in the insect-pollinated flowers. Now when you come to pollination agents, wind-pollinated flowers, they are pollinated by wind, and insect-pollinated flowers are pollinated by insects. When you come to adaptation summary, you will see that those ones for the wind, they are suitable for wind dispersal, and those ones for insect, they are suitable for insect visitation. A report. Produce an individual report or comparison table summarizing the finding. So our report has a title, and our title is Comparison of Wind-Pollinated and Insect-Pollinated Flowers. So we are going to compare the wind-pollinated and insect-pollinated flowers. Introduction. In this activity, we examine the flowers that are pollinated by wind, and we had maize and grasses, and those ones that are pollinated by insects. Those ones we looked at hibiscus, pumpkins. We are comparing their structures, or we compare their structures and related them to their pollination methods. What did we find out? Our findings. Wind-pollinated flowers, they have hanging stamens, exposed anthers, feathery stigmas. Those are to trap airborne pollens. And their pollen is light and smooth to be easily carried by wind. Then we found out that the insect-pollinated flowers, they have bright petals, they are sticky stigmas, they have sticky and spiky pollen, and this is for attaching to the insects. Our conclusion. We concluded that the structures of flowers and their pollen are closely related to their method of pollination. Wind-pollinated flowers, they are adapted to maximize wind dispersal, while the insect-pollinated flowers, these ones attract insects and ensure pollen transfer. Wind versus insect-pollinated flowers. Item 2. We are going to look at field observation. Learners go out to observe maize tassel, grass flowers, insect-pollinated flowers like hibiscus or sunflower. Task. Observe wind-pollinated and insect-pollinated flowers and compare their stamens, anthers, and stigmas, relating each structure to its function. Since we have already gone through this, let's look at these two flowers. Which flower do you think is insect-pollinated? Which one is wind-pollinated? Yeah, at this time, all of us, we can identify that this one is wind-pollinated and this one here is insect-pollinated. Let's look at wind-pollinated. Wind-pollinated, the stamen hang loosely outside the flower. What is the purpose of the stamen of wind-pollinated flowers hanging outside of the flower? Exposed, so wind easily shakes and release pollen. So they are hanging outside the flower. This is to expose them to wind so that they can easily shake and release the pollen. The anthers are large and dangle freely. So when you look at these anthers, you can see that they are really very large and they are just freely dangling outside. Why? Swing in wind to disperse pollen. They are large and outside dangling so that they can be easily swung by wind, and then they allow the dispersion of pollen. These ones are not scented and they don't have nectar. Why? The insect-pollinated, wind-pollinated flower has no nectar. It is not required since insects are not involved. So because the wind-pollinated flowers are not visited by insects, their pollination is not involving insects, therefore they don't need scent, neither do they need nectar. The wind-pollinated flowers, the flowers are small and they are dull colored. Why? Because no need to attract insects. If you look at them, their color, they have like a green color of the petals. And when you look at them, they are dull colored, small in size. Why? No need to attract insects. So they don't need colors, they don't need to be large in size. So, because they are wind-pollinated flowers. They have large feathery stigmas. For what purpose? These are designed to trap airborne pollen. So when you look at them, you will see that their stigma, they are feathery. They have feathery stigma, and these stigma are designed to trap airborne pollen. As we saw that the anther head are above in the air, they are shaken by the passing wind, and then pollen falls off. So the pollen, as it is coming down, it is going to find a feathery stigma, and that feathery stigma is going to trap these pollen grains that are being transported by air. So that's why the stigma are very large to increase the surface area, and the feathery to trap the airborne pollen. The stigmas are exposed outside the flower. So you see this stigma, they will always be exposed outside the flower. Why are they exposed outside of the flower? To increase the chance of catching wind-blown pollen. They will always be outside of the flower so that they are exposed, and when they are exposed and there is movement of any airborne pollen, it can be trapped by the stigma. Now let us go to insect insect-pollinated flowers. For the insect-pollinated flowers, the stamens are firm and positioned where insects land. So when you look at this flower here, this is our insect-pollinated flower. And we have the stamens are here. When you look at where the stamens are located, they are located in the area where the insects are going to land. When the insect comes from here, it will land on the petal, but all around there, they are stamen. So that is a position where the insects are going to land. And what is the purpose of that distribution? They are distributed in such a way that to ensure insects brush against anthers and pick up the pollen. So their exposure, being exposed in such a way that they are in spaces where the insect will land, is to ensure that once the insects are moving and going down the flower to collect nectar, they come back, or when they are going, they touch the body of the insect, and then pollen is transferred from the anther heads to the insects. The anthers are compact and sticky. So when you look at the anthers here, you will see that our anthers here, they are very compact, very small and compact, and they are also sticky. The purpose of this is that sticky pollen on contact to insect body. So the stickiness here of the anther is to trap the pollen grains onto the insect body. We are still on insect-pollinated. We are saying they are brightly colored petals and they have scent. So when you look at our insect-pollinated flower here, you see the petals are colored. And when the petals are colored, they can easily attract insect. The purpose of being colored is to attract insects. Secondly, they produce nectar. So when the insect is moving down, it picks nectar. And as it is coming back, it picks pollen. And as it lands on the stigma, it brushes pollen onto the stigma. So the nectar is like a reward. Nectar is a reward to lure insects to come to the flower. So the nectar is one of some of the things which are going to attract the insect to come to the flower, so that it can bring pollen and it can also pick pollen and to carry out the process of pollination. Still on insect-pollinated flowers, we can still see that they are very small and they have a sticky stigma. If you look at your insect-pollinated flower, you will see that the stigma here is very small. The stigma is very small, but on being small, it is also sticky. What is the purpose of it being sticky? It is to capture pollen, which is brought by insects. So the stigma is small, and being small, it also is sticky so that it can trap the pollen that has been brought by the insect. The stigma is located inside the flower. Why? They positioned where insects can come into contact with them. So when you look at the stigma here, you see that the stigma is always positioned in places where it can come into contact with the insect. And in most cases, they are positioned located inside the flower, such that when the insect comes, after touching itself on pollen and it is moving out, taps onto the stigma and the pollen brushes onto the stigma. So that's why they are positioned inside the flower. Field observation. Examine microscope slides or images of pollen grains from wind-pollinated and insect-pollinated flowers and compare them relating structure to function. So when we look here, by this time we know that these ones are insect-pollinated pollen grains, and these ones are wind-pollinated pollen grains. So we want to relate the structure to function. We shall start with wind-pollinated grains. The wind-pollinated grains, they are small and very light. Why are they very light? So that they can easily be carried by wind. So when you look at wind-pollinated pollen, they are small and they are very light, so that they can easily be blown by wind. They are smooth, or they have a smooth surface. For what purpose? This reduces friction in the air. So when you look at them, you will see that they have got a very smooth surface. And this smooth surface is to reduce friction when they are moving in the air. We are still on wind-pollinated pollen grains. They produced in very large quantity. Those are wind-pollinated pollen grains. They are produced in large quantity. Why are they produced in large quantity? To increase chances of some reaching the stigma. Because they are released into the air, it is not a guarantee that all of them will land onto the stigma. So, if some of them will not land onto the stigma, therefore you need to produce very many, that some of them will be carried away by the wind, but at least there will be an opportunity for some to land onto the stigma. That's why they are produced very large quantities. They are not sticky. They are not what? Sticky. Why are they not sticky? Suited for wind transportation. They are not sticky so that they can easily be transported in wind. Now let us go to insect-pollinated pollen grains. We know that these ones here are our insect pollinated grains, and they are large and heavy. Why are they large and heavy? They are large and heavy, not easily blown away. They are designed for insect transport. So the pollen grain that are for insect pollination, they are heavy. Why are they heavy? So that they are not easily blown away by wind. And they are designed with spikes so that they can easily be attached to the insect. And therefore, being heavy helps them not to be carried by wind. So they will be carried by insect pollinators. Sticky and spiky. For what purpose? To attach easily to insect bodies. So when you look at them, you will see that they are, you may not see the thickness, but at least you can see the spikes. And those spikes are the ones that help them to attach easily onto the insect's body. They are produced in small quantity. They are produced in small quantities. Why? Because there is a high probability of reaching another flower via insect. Because we know that they are going to be carried by what? By insects. From the anther heads to the stigma. So there is no need for you to produce very many of them, because there is a sure deal probability, a guarantee that they are going to reach the stigma of a flower. They are distinctive shapes. They have a distinctive shape. As you can see, their shape is very distinctive. Why are they like that? That one, they are adapted for adhesion to insect. Their shape is really very funny. It is a distinctive shape, but it is an adaptation for attachment onto the body of the insect. Prepare a table or a short report summarizing the differences. So we have our futures here, the anthers, wind-pollinated flower, insect-pollinated flower, and a structure to function. The anther for the wind-pollinated flowers, they are large, they are exposed, and they are dangling. Whereas for those ones of insect-pollinated flowers, they are firmly positioned for insect contact. The structure enables wind release, those ones which are dangling. And those ones that are positioned, the structure enables insect contact. We go to the stigma. The stigma for the wind-pollinated flowers, they are large, they are feathery and exposed. Whereas those for the insect-pollinated flowers, they are very small, sticky, and they are inside. Structure to function. For the wind, they are large to trap wind pollen. For the insect, they are small and sticky so that insect can carry the pollen grains. Pollen. When you look at the pollen for the wind-pollinated flower, pollen grains, they are light, they are smooth, and they are produced in large quantity. And when you look at the insect-pollinated flower pollen grains, these ones are sticky with spikes and they are produced in fewer quantity. The other ones, it's because wind carriage. That's why they are light and smooth, and they need to be many because some of them will not land onto the stigma. Whereas these ones for insect-pollinated flower, they are sticky and spiky and fewer in number because they stick on insects, and they are fewer so that there is a guarantee that they will reach the stigma of a flower. Then we have attractants. Attractants, if you look at the wind-pollinated flowers, they don't have scent, neither do they have nectar. And when you look at the insect-pollinated flowers, you are going to find their scent and you are going to find nectar. This attracts insects for pollination. Thank you very much for participating in topic 10.2. We have been looking at sexual reproduction in plants. Our learning outcome has been B. Know the processes of pollination, fertilization, and fruit formation. We have been focusing on this learning activity, and each learner should have got something. In groups or pairs, learners examine specimens or diagrams of insect-pollinated flowers. They research using different sources and then discuss. 1. The meaning of the term pollination and how pollination takes place. How fertilization takes place. How seeds and fruits develop. Individuals produce annotated diagrams explaining these processes. Thank you for participating. Please visit me at Mugabi Joshua Biology on YouTube. Don't forget to like, to share, and subscribe.